The moment Earth's delegation received the invitation to join the pan-galactic neuro-concordance, nobody quite understood what it meant. The press framed it as an honor. The scientists saw it as a data goldmine. The military called it a potential security breach wrapped in diplomacy. But to Evan Mallory, one of the first humans selected to participate, it sounded like the beginning of something utterly impossible. He was a neuroscientist with a background in cognitive linguistics, fluent in 4 languages and terrible at returning phone calls. When the offer came, he was in a hospital, recovering from a torn rotator cuff he'd gotten after tripping over a laundry basket while trying to grab a falling plate of deviled eggs. He accepted anyway, shoulder brace and all. The concordance, as the aliens called it, was not a place. It was a mental arena, a constructed psychic environment stitched from the collective subconscious of over 45 intelligent species. Emotions, memories, intentions, all translated instantly and without words. Here, misunderstandings dissolved like mist. Species once at war now debated ethics by reliving one another's ancestral history. No weapons, no barriers, just thought. Evan arrived on the artificial moon of Solaris Prime with a mixed team of diplomats, scientists, and one guy from the Department of Agriculture who insisted he'd be useful if anything tries to grow sentient mold. They were led into a meditation chamber rimmed with bioorganic tech and soft pulses of bioluminescence. "Do not resist the concordance link," the host said, a tall, translucent being named Valeth. "Let your mind relax. It will feel like dreaming." Evan's last coherent thought before the link activated was whether he remembered to feed his neighbor's cat. Inside, it began beautifully. The concordance unfolded like a living tapestry. Vast golden skies, floating plateaus of pure memory, rivers that whispered ancient truths. Emotions moved like wind, brushing thoughts with clarity and kindness. Evan glimpsed alien memories of family rituals, ecosystems built on cooperation, even the shared pain of species-wide traumas. He felt humbled. Then came the leak. No one knew exactly who caused it, but theories abounded. Some blamed Evan. Others blamed Nina Torres, the linguist who had passed out during the synchronization process, mumbling about a clown car of context. What was clear was that something had slipped through the human filters. A tangle of raw subconscious nonsense so dense it bypassed concordance safeguards. It started with a TX, not a majestic, real T-Rex. This one was wearing a tuxedo, had laser eyes, and was inexplicably screaming quotes from motivational sports films while chasing a delegation of feathered serpentine beings from Nishiel Prime. The monsters weren't just visible, they were real to the mind. In the concordance, thoughts manifested physically. So when a diplomat from the water-based Shalari species tried to counter the beast with pacifist memories, the T-Rex vaporized the memories with twin I-beams. Next came the toast cat. It flew across the sky, trailing rainbows, giggling. A feline with a body made of bread, buttered on one side and animated by some ancient internet energy no concordance protocol could decipher. The Catharians, a crystalline hive species, immediately declared it a deity and began singing worship hymns, composed entirely of pixelated cat sounds. Panic spread. The peaceful landscape of shared empathy now pulsed with the fragmented detritus of human culture. Pop references, internet jokes, absurd contradictions. A weeping fairy with 3 heads debated a confused Martian ambassador about whether grilled cheese could be a metaphor for love. A sponge in square pants attempted to explain quantum entanglement while riding a unicorn that turned into a tax document mid-sentence. Evan tried to intervene. He pulled himself from the rainbow swamp where an alien was sobbing because it believed it was now a potato. He focused his mind, tried to generate a calm, ordered memory, something universal. He thought of his mother's hands, making bread on a Sunday morning. The flour, the warmth, the slowness of it. It almost worked. The swamp stilled. The potato alien blinked. Then someone accidentally thought about clowns. Instantly, 30-foot jugglers emerged from the ether, honking horns that summoned flying ducks shaped like accordions. One alien fainted. Another began shedding its outer shell in what the humans later learned was considered a public breakdown ritual among the Laxan. By hour 3, the Concordance supervisors were in crisis mode. Emergency cognitive barriers tried to suppress the chaos but were quickly overwhelmed by the sheer diversity of human imagination. The problem wasn't hostility, it was unpredictability. Humans didn't just store memories, they remixed them. A tragedy could morph into a sitcom. A fear could become a joke, then loop back into inspiration. Logic didn't apply the same way. Vaelth confronted Evan directly within a hastily reconstructed memory dome. "You were supposed to bring unity," Vaelth said. "Instead, you brought unfiltered paradoxes." "We didn't mean to," Evan said, rubbing his still healing shoulder. "It's just our brains don't always stay in the lines. This realm was built for clarity, not chaos. But chaos is sometimes how we understand each other." A sudden shimmer rippled across the space. 100-foot dragon appeared in the sky, flapping its wings. It opened its mouth. Instead of fire, it began delivering a rousing speech from an old animated movie about believing in yourself. To everyone's surprise, the speech worked. Not in the way it was intended, but it created a moment of shared emotion. The dragon's monologue triggered overlapping empathy waves. The Catharians wept in 7-toned harmony. The Nishil serpents curled around each other, resonating. Even Vaelith blinked in surprise. "You projected inspiration," he said. "No. A memory of inspiration," Evan said. "It's not the dragon that matters. It's what we felt when we first saw it." More humans arrived later that day. A girl from Taiwan accidentally summoned a giant dumpling that taught ethics. A teen from Brazil cried from stress and generated a sandcastle that taught everyone what homesickness truly felt like. By sundown, the Concordance looked like a cross between a dream museum and a toy store designed by a philosophy major. It wasn't what the aliens had built, but it wasn't wrong either. Vaelith stood with Evan at the edge of a memory cliff. "Your species," he said, "is dangerously imaginative." Evan didn't disagree. "We're not always wise, but we're good at making meaning out of madness. And madness out of meaning." Also that, for now, the Concordance had stabilized. The chaos remained, but now under cautious observation. Protocols were rewritten. New psychic filtration layers were discussed. But nothing could undo what had happened. The aliens had wanted peace. They got memes, monsters, and a new form of understanding no one had anticipated. And this was only the first day. By the second day, every alien inside the Concordance was walking on metaphorical eggshells, or actual ones in the case of the Renthari, who now believed eggs were sacred symbols of sanity after a meme depicting a googly-eyed omelet had comforted them during the previous night's panic wave. The shared mindscape had become a patchwork of controlled chaos. No longer a serene utopia, it was now a constantly morphing landscape with emotional gravity, shifting narratives, and a background soundtrack that occasionally played theme songs from forgotten sitcoms. Evan found himself summoned to the Mental Integrity Council, a rare emergency gathering of high-level Concordance architects. They convened on a floating disk of reason, hovering above a mind ocean filled with concept jellyfish. Each council member's projection appeared differently, some as glowing trees, one as a chessboard with moving eyes, and one as a massive snail with a sash that read, "Logic matters." "You were warned about neural entropy," the snail said. "Your people weaponized imagination." "We didn't weaponize it," Evan said. "It just leaks." Nina Torres chimed in. She'd recovered from her earlier collapse and now wore a spectral jacket that changed color with her emotions. "This isn't sabotage, it's cultural bleed. You invited an entire species without a volume knob. We detected a psychogenic construct that classified itself as a goose," said the sentient chessboard. "It bit 3 diplomats." "That one's on Reggie," Nina muttered. He watched a video loop of goose attacks right before the upload. Didn't realize he was still cinched. The council debated revoking human access. But something unexpected had occurred overnight. Several alien delegations requested further exposure to the human constructs. The Shalari had constructed temples around the toast cat, believing it held secrets about duality. The Sketh, usually cold logic-drivens, now held debates entirely in limerick form, inspired by an accidental burst of Evan's childhood poetry. The Morvali, who had never cried in their known evolutionary history, experienced tears while reliving a recreated Earth movie scene where a robot tells a child it understands love. Emotions had become shared, not filtered. Interpretations grew wild, understanding, ironically, deepened. Despite this, the chaos hadn't stopped causing problems. That morning, an internal storm of anxiety from a homesick human teen had caused a literal thundercloud of self-doubt to hover over the diplomatic proceedings. Delegates from 3 species were temporarily paralyzed by existential dread when the storm rained down echoes of, "What if I'm not good enough?" Evan had to step in again. He approached the storm alone. Psychically, this meant focusing, projecting calm, and opening his mind fully to the concordance in that area. He climbed the storm not by dispelling it, but by leaning into its cause. The homesickness, the longing, the raw ache of wanting to feel anchored. He brought forward a memory of watching the sunrise from his father's porch, a mug of coffee in hand, the smell of dew and toast in the air. He shared it with the storm. It didn't vanish, but it changed, softened. The clouds curled in on themselves and became a slow rain of nostalgic warmth. Delegates watched in silence. Afterward, Valeth met Evan again. "You could have buried it," Valeth said. "Why share your own vulnerability?" "Because that's what we do. We see someone hurting, we remember how we hurt too. But your minds move without limits, unpredictable, insecure, terrifying." Evan exhaled. "You call it terrifying. We call it being human." More adaptations followed. The Concordance assigned human interpreters, called guides, to help incoming species navigate the chaotic portions. Instead of banning the madness, they gave it structure. A mental sanctuary was formed where anyone could view human cultural output under controlled conditions. It was called the Lounge, a floating theater that replayed memes, childhood stories, ancient cartoons, with commentary tracks provided by humans. The Lounge became an unexpected success. Delegates came in curious. They left laughing, or crying, or questioning everything they'd ever known about breakfast cereal mascots. And then came the monsters. Not memes, not nostalgia, but the truly frightening ones. One appeared while a group of Zarelian thinkers were deep diving into human survival memories. The Zarelians wanted to understand human adaptability. They found a trove of dreams, dark ones. The first was a tall, shadowed figure with no face, arms that stretched too far, emerging from the woods of an old Earth memory. It didn't speak. It simply pointed. Wherever it pointed, the concordance rippled in fear. Another was worse. A featureless humanoid with glassy eyes, part nightmare, part urban myth, born from collective human childhood stories whispered under blankets. One of the alien observers had to be forcibly de-cinched. He refused to re-enter the concordance for hours. Evan and Nina met with the psychological calibration team. "You have repositories of horror," said a Namekian with a head like a jellyfish lamp. "Why store these fears so vividly?" "Because we've always needed stories to make fear manageable," Nina explained. "We wrap the dark in narrative, give it rules." "But the concordance has no narrative filters," the jellyfish replied. "Your monsters breathe." They proposed a firewall, a mental quarantine system for human fear constructs. But Evan resisted. "We can't just lock it away. We need to help them understand why it's there." So a new zone was formed, the menagerie. It was a safe, guided part of the concordance where terrifying constructs could be observed, discussed, and even reshaped. Each creature bore a plaque detailing its origin. Nightmares became case studies. An eight-legged dentist from someone's early trauma was recast as a lesson in resilience. A looming clown creature became a metaphor for emotional ambiguity. Some aliens couldn't handle it. Others found catharsis. The Catharians, after hours of studying human nightmares, created a ritual where they reenacted confronting their own inner shadows. They called it walking the dream maw. A few diplomats accused Earth of corrupting the concordance. Others insisted that chaos had created something deeper than peace, empathy. And still, each day brought new surprises. A motivational speech from a talking fish, animated in 2003, unexpectedly saved an entire delegate pod from a collective shame spiral. A throwaway joke about everything being cake caused a species to reevaluate the nature of matter. A group of old cartoons hosted a panel on absurdism, drawing record attendance. Evan stood on a mind bridge one evening, watching the stars of the concordance swirl. Valeth approached quietly. "There is balance, now. Uneasy, but real." "It was never going to be clean," Evan said. "Peace rarely is. Yet we have more understanding now than in decades of structured negotiation." Evan nodded. "Sometimes you don't need words. Just a ridiculous dinosaur in a tuxedo to remind you what fear looks like when it's absurd." Valeth almost smiled. Or maybe the projection glitched. "Your species has rewritten the rules. Not on purpose. That makes it worse." They stood in silence, surrounded by the surreal yet oddly functioning symphony of a shared mental universe. A floating ice cream cone drifted by. It whispered something philosophical in Old Latin. Neither of them flinched. By the third cycle, the concordance was no longer just a diplomatic tool. It was a spectacle, a cultural shockwave, a sentient theater of the absurd. Alien news outlets began broadcasting concordance highlights, showcasing the most bewildering human-inspired incidents. Viewership across the spiral arms tripled in a week. Evan barely slept anymore. Sleep in the concordance wasn't restful. Human minds couldn't fully log off. Every time a participant dreamed, it created ripples. He once woke inside the dream of an Androlith monk and had to explain why his subconscious decided to throw a family barbecue in the middle of a spiritual ceremony. The Mind Integration Council now had a full-time humanity monitor team. They called themselves the Dream Watch. Most were Earth volunteers. Others were aliens who had become so fascinated by humanity's subconscious that they switched specialties entirely. One exobiologist from Zellerin now held lectures titled "The Evolutionary Value of Memes." But with expansion came friction. Not all species appreciated the new direction. The Zarnith Collective, known for their emotionless logic and near-infinite memory, filed a formal objection. "This realm was intended for clarity," their representative declared. "It has become an emotional amusement park." Their concern wasn't without merit. An incident the day before had nearly caused a full mental collapse in the diplomat from Grixa 12. Someone had unconsciously projected a scene from a horror comedy about sentient vegetables. The Grixan, who resembled a root system, believed he was being mocked. He had to be talked down by a therapy llama. Evan and Nina were called before the Central Arbitration Assembly. "You have turned trauma into entertainment," the Zarnith rep said. "No," Evan replied. "We've shown that it's survivable." There was silence. Then Valeth rose, uninvited. "Human constructs destabilize the concordance," he said. "But they also revealed its flaw." The council stirred. Valeth continued. "We built a realm for peaceful minds. But peace without exposure to chaos is brittle. Harmony must flex, or it breaks." Still, tensions mounted. A faction of species, now calling themselves the Purists, proposed a rollback. Erase the most volatile human imprints and re-establish the Concordance's original rule set. A vote was scheduled for 3 cycles later. The outcome was uncertain. In the meantime, the lounge was restricted. The menagerie was declared high risk and required neural clearance. Dozens of guides were delinked. And most disturbingly, Evan received notice that his mind would be reviewed for excessive volatility. "Are they calling you unstable?" Nina asked, as they sat on a hovering thought raft shaped like a sandwich. "More like inspiring too many monsters." He wasn't angry. He understood, but understanding didn't make the warning sting less. That night, a breach occurred. It wasn't human this time. One of the purest delegates had tried to override the concordance's filter to block all unpredictable stimuli. The override triggered a recursive loop, a feedback of mental contradictions. The system glitched. For 7 seconds, every being in the concordance experienced each other's emotions simultaneously. 7 seconds was enough. Hundreds collapsed. The psychic weight was enormous. Creatures who had never felt grief tasted human guilt, alien fear, parental loss, existential terror. Species that thrived on order suddenly felt chaos within. Only the humans, and a handful of those who had spent time in the lounge or menagerie, remained functional. Evan knew what had to be done. He requested an emergency convergence. Every delegate, every mind, synced in one spot. He stood in the center of the mindscape, which now resembled a strange hybrid between a courtroom, a nursery, and a living painting. "I know you think we broke this place," Evan began. "We probably did." Murmurs flickered. The mindscape rippled. But it was never going to stay perfect. Not if it was real. He pointed to the shadows around them, now crawling with fragments. Half-thoughts, ghost memories, fears. "These things exist in all of you. You just never gave them names." He conjured a memory. A hospital room. His own, weeks before his selection. He showed them the pain of not being able to lift his own arm. The helplessness of waiting for a diagnosis. The flicker of shame at being so fragile. Then he projected something else. The first step he took after surgery. Slow, uncertain, real. "You want peace," he said. "We all do. But peace isn't the absence of madness. It's the courage to stand inside it and still try to reach each other." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was listening. One by one, the delegates responded. Some with images, others with raw emotion. A tree falling, a child lost, a sun rising over burned ground, pain and healing, despair and hope, all together. The concordance changed. Not exploded, not rewritten, it evolved. New rules were born, not to block chaos, but to navigate it. New zones emerged, co-designed by mixed teams. The lounge reopened, now with sections curated by non-human guides. The menagerie became a training ground for emotional resilience. A new area was created, the Imaginarium, a voluntary zone where beings could create shared myths and test reality's edge. Species once unable to laugh now held open mic sessions, experimenting with absurdity. The purists didn't dissolve, but they lost support. Most came to understand that the concordance wasn't a palace. It was a storm shelter, with windows. Valeth visited Evan one evening. No summons, no politics. "The toast cat," Valeth said, staring into the concordance sky, "has been formally canonized by the Kotharian pantheon." Evan sighed. "Sorry about that. I find its doctrine oddly coherent." They watched the sky twist, then settle. Evan's shoulder still ached on cold days. The hospital scar itched when he was nervous. But inside the concordance, he felt at home. Chaos hadn't destroyed unity. It had completed it. 2 solar rotations later, the concordance held its first true celebration. Not of peace, not of victory, but of resilience. They called it the Day of the Shared Flame, a symbolic rebirth of the mind space, now collectively rebuilt, scarred and redefined by every species within. Evan stood in the central node, a serene, floating plaza, shaped like a spiraling helix of glass and stardust. Around him, the atmosphere shimmered with echoes of stories and feelings, recorded over the last week. Not just human impressions anymore, but contributions from all corners of the concordance. Laughter encoded in fractal sound patterns from the Nithari, visual harmonies from the amorphous Glonths, scent-based epics from the Ru, and the most recent addition, a series of comedic poems composed by the once rigid Zarnithians titled Orderly Chaos. A projection flickered beside him. It was Nina, beaming. "They put a meme archive next to the diplomatic gallery," she said. "Guess which one has more traffic? I give it a week before someone accidentally worships a sandwich." Too late. The Skeths just declared a peanut butter and jelly diorama to be a foundational myth. A few feet away, a delegate from the winged Ellerai species offered emotional seeds. Tiny, glowing orbs of shared memories, meant to be experienced together in silence. Evan accepted one. As he held it, a scene bloomed in his mind. A field at dusk, warm wind, two Ellerai siblings shaping clouds together. He blinked, slightly choked up. The seed disintegrated into light. The human contingent had grown. Evan was now joined by artists, psychologists, and yes, even the Department of Agriculture guy, who had somehow introduced a mind garden that produced metaphorical fruit. You could literally taste your childhood summer, or the bittersweet sting of letting go. The toast cat now resided in its own temple. Devotees from 6 species arrived daily to seek enlightenment via absurdity. Some even began writing sacred scrolls, interpreting the meaning of its rainbow trail. When asked how he felt about indirectly launching a pan-species religious movement based on an internet meme, Evan only muttered, "It's better than a death cult." But the concordance was not without its challenges. The memory infrastructure needed regular recalibration. A single, badly filtered fear thought from a child in Sector 12 had once triggered a temporary field of dentist birds, creatures whose shrill lectures about flossing nearly derailed a critical economic summit. Yet no one suggested deleting the child's memory. Instead, the creatures were archived, studied, and now served as mascots in dental outreach programs. A milestone was approaching. Humans were to be formally integrated as permanent contributors, not just guests. The ceremony would require one delegate to stand alone in the mind core and offer a binding projection, a piece of memory that would forever join the concordance matrix. No edits, no filters, pure and vulnerable. Evan was nominated. He didn't fight it, he just asked for a quiet room beforehand. He sat alone, offline from the shared mind, heart thudding. His shoulder ached faintly from the old injury. He rotated it carefully, still stiff, still real. When the time came, he entered the core. The concordance held its breath. He didn't speak. He thought and projected. It wasn't a great victory or a brilliant idea. It was a night. A hospital corridor. Bleak lights. Cold coffee. He was 15. His mother had broken her leg badly, a nasty compound fracture from slipping off a stepladder. He remembered watching the doctors try to reset the bone while she winced and gritted her teeth, barely holding it together. He remembered the hours afterward, holding her hand when the pain meds wore off, when she kept whispering, "I'm okay," even though she clearly wasn't. And then, the moment that stayed with him most, her weak smile when she caught him crying. "You've got my stubbornness," she said. "That'll get you through anything." He shared all of it. Not the words, not the images, but the feeling that you could be broken, hurting, terrified, and still reach out, still comfort someone else. The projection settled like golden dust into the concordance. When it ended, no one clapped. There was no need. The silence was filled with shared knowing. The concordance accepted the memory. From that moment, humans were no longer considered unpredictable guests. They were paradox partners. Their contribution wasn't clarity, it was transformation, not in spite of chaos, but through it. In the following days, Evan stepped back. Others took his place. Therapists guiding emotional exchanges, artists building new symbols, children creating entirely new languages of play. One girl invented a musical dialect made of hiccups and delight. The Rue adopted it as a secondary protocol. On the last day before returning home, Evan walked alone through a quiet corridor of the mindscape, an area called the Reflections, where memories condensed like dew on thought fronds. Vaelith appeared beside him without fanfare. "You changed us," Vaelith said. "No, we just reminded you what it's like to feel messy things and still keep walking." "I once feared your imagination," Vaelith admitted. "Now I see it was your compass all along." They paused. A gentle wind, made of comforting nostalgia, rustled through the corridor. "You'll return?" Vaelith asked. "If you let us," Evan said. "We will. But next time, please warn us before releasing a motivational lizard that shouts sports slogans." No promises. They parted without ceremony. Back on Earth, Evan returned to research, therapy sessions, and occasionally chasing his neighbor's cat when it escaped again. The world spun on, grounded in gravity and routine. But in orbit and across star systems, echoes of Earth's chaos still rippled. Messy, vivid, absurd, and full of meaning. The aliens had linked minds for peace. The humans had brought monsters, memes, and mayhem. And in doing so, they made the peace stronger than it had ever been.